welcome to Darvanalee Design Studio. For those that don't know, my name's Nicole Reed, and today we are here for part 4 of our large mountain retreat bag. Now today is the final assembly, so we are going to be attaching the sides to the exterior and the lining and creating the main part of the bag. Then we will be putting the final zipper on and adding those tabs to make them into handles. So you know what I'm talking about. These are the handles that I'm talking about. This is the exterior zip that opens up and allows the bag to lay nice and flat. So we do have to make some zipper tabs for that, and we attach it in with the binding so it's nice and secure, and we machine that on. So we're going to get started on doing all that. We've done all of our assembly in the past 3 videos, so today it's just putting all those components together to achieve our bag. So let's get started. Okay, so here we are at the final assembly, which is absolutely fantastic. You must be getting excited by now. I know I'm excited to get it, help you finish your bag. So you're going to need a few things today. You're going to need your general sewing supplies. You grab your rotary cutter, your scissors, thread snips, poking device. You're going to need some wonder clips as well. You're also going to need some Roxanne's basted glue and a hand thread and needle threader if you decide to hand sew your binding on. I personally hand sew my binding on. I think it gives me a neater finish, and it's less stress on my shoulders and my sewing machine trying to sew through all the layers. All right, so the things that you're going to need, apart from your general sewing supplies, you're also going to need an iron and an ironing pad, and you're also going to need your lining and your exterior fabric. Now your lining should have your pin cushion attached to it and also the flat pocket, and your exterior fabric for the bag should be quilted by now. Then you're going to need your 6 internal pockets that will be attached to the sides of the bag. You're also going to need some binding. Okay, this is going to help encase all our raw edges of our bag and attach our external zipper. And you're also going to need your zipper tabs. So that should be the last lot of fabric that you've got cut in the binding and the zipper tabs. And you're also going to need your open-ended zipper or a zipper by the yard. I just use the open-end zipper because I have them readily available all the time. All right, so I'm going to move all this out of the way, and we're going to get started. So the first thing that we're going to start with is we're going to make our zipper tab. So you can see here I've got just like a little zipper pouch, so to speak. So we need to do that to the other one. So you need your iron and your ironing pad for that. You're also going to need your Roxanne basted glue, and you're going to need a ruler and a marking device. So to do that, all we're going to do is we are going to draw a 1/4 inch seam allowance around all of that. Okay, and then we're going to get our Roxanne glue, and we're just going to put a couple of dots there and dots at the other short end as well. Okay, running out. Bringing over our ironing pad, we're just going to fold that edge over, and then we'll just press that into place. And then we're going to do exactly the same with the other end. Okay, being careful not to iron off your marks. If you do, it doesn't matter, you can just remark it again. And then basically all we're going to do is head over to the sewing machine, and we're going to make a little pouch. So you're going to fold it up, so short end to short end with the right sides facing each other, and then you're just going to grab a pin and you're going to pop that into place. Now you want your 2 folded over edges to actually be lining up with each other. Now we're not going to stitch those because we'll do that later. All we're going to do now is we're going to go down each side here by 1/4 inch, and we're going to back stitch on either side. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm going to do that. So if you don't have a 1/4 inch foot, just drawing that line there will make it easy for you. So just stitch on that line. Okay, so we've stitched that into place. We've just used a default stitch length, and then you're just going to trim off your threads. Just like so. And then all you're going to do is you're just going to snip your corners off without snipping into your stitches. That is a mouthful. Alright, so once you've done that, we're just going to turn that back out, poking our corners out. And then all we're going to do is we're going to give that a really good press. And there we go, we've got our 2 zipper tabs. So we can set them aside now, and next we're going to start on our binding. So to make our binding, we need enough binding for our zipper and also the sides of our bag. So basically all we're going to do is we've got 4 strips here, and we are going to sew them together. So I always like to get rid of my selvage end, so I just grab my scissors and I will just cut that off, and I'm going to repeat that for all 4 strips. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make our binding. The first thing that you need to do is lay 1 strip down with it facing up. Then you're going to get your second strip and you're going to just go past it a little bit and in a little bit, so just like that. Okay, you don't want to have it too much, you just want to have it maybe 1/2 inch in from either way. Okay, and then what I like to do is I just grab my marking device, whether it be a friction pen or a chalk marker or a pencil, it doesn't matter because you're not going to see it, it's on the wrong side, and then I just mark from corner to corner. Just like so. So you can see there that I've marked corner to corner. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll grab a couple of pins and I'll just pop them in. Just like so. And now I know I can head to the sewing machine and I can stitch that down. And you're just going to stitch on that line. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine and we're going to start doing our binding. So basically all you're going to do is you are going to place your binding underneath your needle and your presser foot, and then you're just going to stitch directly on that line, making sure that you back stitch at the beginning and at the end. It just helps it secure, because when we're making it, it can pull apart if you open it too far, so it's better to do a little bit of a reverse and then just sew down to the end. And that's it. So you can see there that I've stitched on that line. So now what we do is we just take our pins out, snip our threads away, and then just sort of eyeballing it about 1/4 inch. If you want to mark it with your ruler, you can. You're just going to snip, not on this side where we've got our 2 bits of fabric, on this bit here that's got nothing connected to it. So we're just going to snip around about 1/4 inch. If it's a little bit more or a little bit less, don't stress it, it's just your binding and you won't even see that. So you can see there I've just taken off those 2 little bits of fabric. I've got a 1/4 inch seam, and then this will open up and you can see there that I've got a join in it. Sometimes it matches up, sometimes it might not, so don't stress too much about it. Alright, so then we're going to continue on to our next one. So we just run down, we turn it over, and we're ready to go. So I'm just going to sit that on the machine. Hopefully it won't take off on me. I'm going to grab another piece of binding, and again I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to lay them on top of each other about 1/2 inch away. Then I'll just grab my ruler and my pen, make a mark, and then we're ready to sew. So I'm going to continue doing that for the rest of the pieces, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so now our binding is all ready to go. We'll head back to the ironing pad and we'll create our binding. Okay, so we've got all our binding, we've got our ironing pad, and we've got our iron. And basically all we're going to do now is we're going to find our little joins, and I like to just open my seams up. It makes it sit a little bit flatter and is also less bulk. Okay, and I will give them a little bit of a press, and I'll just work my way along my strip. Okay, so that is all pressed open, and now we're going to go back to the other end, and we are going to lay our binding strip with the wrong side facing up, and then all we're going to do is fold it over so the pretty sides are facing up. You're going to match your raw edges here and your raw edge here, and then you're just going to press all the way along your strip. Okay, so there you go. We have done our binding, and now we can set that aside, and we're going to move on to the next step, which is actually attaching our binding and the sides of our bag to the exterior and the lining. Okay, so here comes the fun part. This is where we're going to assemble the main parts of the bag. So we need our exterior, we need our lining, and we need our center pockets. So the first thing that you're going to do is you are going to take your exterior fabric and you're going to lay it with the inner facing up. Okay, so your pretty side is going to be down. Then you're going to take your lining and you are going to place that on top of your exterior fabric. Now this can be a little bit tricky to get it lining up because the two inner facings are both fusible and they're not sliding off each other, they're gripping. So make sure that you check and double check that your raw edges are lining up. You're going to grab your Wonder clips and you are just going to clip that all into place down one side. And then you will repeat that for the opposite side as well. Now don't worry too much about this end just here yet. We're just going to be focusing on the sides. Spin that around. At this point too, when we're assembling here, I just grab the needle book, and what I'll do is I will just grab a pin and I will just pin that out of the way. It'll just make it a little bit easier for me to work this side. Alright, so again we're going to line our raw edges up and we're going to clip that into place. And I always like to have one at each end as well, because sometimes they can shift on you. Okay, so just making sure that that is laying flat. It will sit a little bit funny up here because the pin cushion is just the nature of it, the way it's sitting there. Once we stitch everything down, it'll sit a lot flatter for you. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our internal pockets, okay, and we want the mesh pocket to be facing towards the pin cushion. All right, so we've got that in place, and then we are just going to sit that into place. Now you can measure it to find the middle, and I do encourage you to do that. Okay, so hopefully this is all fitting on camera because it's not exactly a small bag. So I'll show you on one side what we're going to do. So basically I have found the center points, and I've roughly put down the bag where it's got to sit. So a few things that I want to point out to you. You will need to find the center point of between the 3 pockets, okay, and you're going to line that up with your center mark on your lining and exterior. Okay, so I've done that off camera because I don't want to give away any of the measurements. And then you're just going to lay this raw edge here, you're going to just lay that along there, and you're just going to clip that into place for a moment. So you don't want to pull it too tight so it's, you know, pulling up the edges of the bag or anything like that. You want to have it sitting nice and flat and just relaxed. Okay, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you. Just, you don't want to put too much tension on it, okay, because what we want is we want this bag to be able to open up and lay flat. So if I've got too much tension, as you can see here, it's not going to lay flat. So I just want to take a little bit of that tension off, get it to lay flat, lining up my raw edges of the side of the bag with the side of the raw edges of the lining and the exterior, and just pop that into place. Now if it does sit up a little bit and you can't get it to relax, that's okay, that's fine, but just try not to have too much pressure on it. All right, so I know that they're sitting roughly in place, and I've got them relatively even. Okay, so you can just eyeball that and you can see that they're sitting there nicely. And now what we're going to do is we're going to clip this side all into place. Okay, so all I'm going to do is grab my wonder clips and use as many as you can. I don't recommend you using pins for this. You will bend all your pins because you're going through quite an amount of bulk here. So you've got your exterior fabric, your lining fabric, and then you've got the sides of your bag as well. Now it looks like it's a little bit daunting and it's going to be hard to do. It is quite easy, and we do all these steps in one go as opposed to trying to stitch one section, then stitch another section, and then stitch another section on. We are actually going to do everything in one movement. Okay, so you can see here I'm just getting my sides to sit as nice as possible. I'm clipping where those joins are or close to them, and I'm trying to get everything to line up. Now the reason when we put the pockets in we didn't go all the way to the bottom is so that we can sew through this, and we're not sewing through the pockets as well, because the pockets aren't actually attached to anything in the center of the bag. So that way you can put a ruler underneath there, or a small cutting mat, or you know, you can put a magazine will fit under there quite nicely as well. You can put your patterns under there, whatever you want to put under there that you don't want to get crushed. Okay, so just play around with it, get all your raw edges to line up, and you can see there that it's just sitting there. It's not got a lot of tension on it, it's just nice and relaxed. All right, so now you've done this side, you're going to do exactly the same what you've done here to the other side. Okay, so both of our sides are done, so you can see there that our bag will come up and it's going to close. We've got our sides in, but first of all we need to put our binding on. All right, so you're going to turn your bag upside down, And you're just going to have this part exposed here. And what I like to do at this point is I measure this and then I cut 2 of the binding. So I measure each side and make sure that I've got enough. So I'll measure from this side to this side, making sure that everything is going to be on there okay. And I cut a little bit extra, so 1/2 inch extra, just to give or even 1 inch extra. There is plenty of binding here to put that on. And we can always trim that off. We don't need to turn it under or anything like that, because this side of the binding is actually encased in the zipper binding, so it makes it super easy. All right, so I've cut 2 pieces, and I can set the rest of the binding aside because that is for our external zipper. All right, so I just find the middle of the binding, so I do that by folding it in half and then popping a pin into it. And then I'm just going to place my raw edges with the other raw edges, and I'm just going to use those binding clips as a guide for me. Okay, so I already know where my center point is, and you can see here I'm just clipping that on. So you can see what I'm saying about we're not doing it step by step, we're doing this all in one step. And you go all the way to the end, making sure that all our raw edges are lining up. Now, before you pull off your wonder clips to pin on your binding, make sure that you're holding all the pieces in place, and just quickly pinch that off and put it straight back on so there's no movement at all. And before you sew, make sure that you double check that. Okay, so you might be wondering why I'm putting the binding on this side when we're going to be sewing on the other side. I'm putting it on this side because this is the outside of the bag, so when it rolls over, you've got a nice, clean, even binding, and you're not going to see any of your binding stitches or anything like that. Now, if you're going to machine bind this on, now is you will actually have to stitch that on, and then you will roll it over, and then you will stitch it down again. I have tried to do it where we just roll it over and stitch it in place. I have more problems than not, so my suggestion is that you just stitch it into place with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just using a basting one, and then that'll hold everything in place for you. Then you can roll it over and stitch it down with 1/4 inch. All right, so I don't like to do it that way, so the way I do it is I stitch it down using 1/4 inch now, and then I'll roll that over and hand stitch that. So I'm going to do the binding on the other side, and then we'll head to the sewing machine. Okay, so we're at the sewing machine, and basically what's going to happen is, this is going to be a little bit tricky for some, okay, but it is doable. So basically all you're going to do is we're going to stitch 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down here. If you find it easier to do a basting stitch first and then go back for 1/8 of an inch, you can do that. I don't have an issue with going through all of them at 1/4 inch. Now, it's going to be a little bit tricky for you to get it underneath the sewing, the presser foot. So basically what you need to do is clear everything out of the way. And then what you're going to do is you're going to just, I don't know if you can see that, you're going to just crush the sides of the pockets down, okay? And then this is going to give you access to sewing through here. Now, you don't want to do any more than the recommended seam allowance, because then you're going to be going through the edge of the pockets. Now, you don't want to do that, okay? So basically all I'm going to do is I'm going to start at one end, I'm going to do a back stitch, and then I'm going to stitch nice and slowly through. If you haven't changed your needle to a denim needle, now is the time to do that. Hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing, because it is such a big bag, it is probably going to block some of the view, but you'll get the general idea of it, and I will show you again what we're actually working on. So I'm going to start at this end, and I'm going to pop that underneath the presser foot like so. I'm going to move my wonder clip. I'm going to put my needle in the down position. I'm also going to have my tailor's awl as well, just to help me out. to help it go through. I'm going to reduce the speed down on my sewing machine as well. I don't want to go super flat out for this. So I've got my everything in place. I've got my needle in the down position so I can let go of my hands now. I'm going to close the other end of the bag up and just lean it against my body. And what I'm going to do is just let it feed through. Now I'm going to do a back stitch here at the beginning, and I'll also do one at the end. And then I'm just going to slowly but surely go through. Now when you get to the edge of the bag, I like to do a little bit of a back stitch there because it has a lot of pressure on it when it's being opened and closed. So I will stitch up to here, I'll get to here, I'll come over the seam that is just near this wonder clip here, and then I'll stitch a couple of stitches, go back, stitch a couple more stitches forward, go back again, and then come forward again. And I've done that with all my bags because basically there is a lot of pressure when you're opening up the bag. It's sitting there flat and you don't want that to come apart because you're going to have to pick your binding off and start again. All right, so we will use our tailor's awl just to help go through your, if you've got a nice brand new needle in there, you should be right. You should be able to just go through this like butter. If you're having trouble, slow down. Where you're having trouble, hand crank if you need to, okay? Because I know that not all machines are going to be able to cope with this, but I have had people on very basic machines make these bags and they've just taken those tips and tricks of just hand cranking it, not trying to force it, using their tailor's awl, and you'll have a beautiful bag at the end of it. All right, so I've come forward a couple of stitches. I'm just going to do a back stitch and now I'm going to continue on. So that's thread out of the way. And I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now if you're finding that your machine is not moving, and I've purposely left it like that, you can see that it was really struggling to move, elongate your stitch up a little bit, as if you're top stitching. Okay, it will still be a secure stitch for it. You're going through many layers, so you need to have that little bit longer. Okay, and now you can see it's moving a little bit better. All right, so I'm coming up to that side of the bag that's going to be attaching to the lining. I'm putting my tailor's awl on the point to help it go under the presser foot. And now what I'll do is I'll come up and go over that by a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to go back a couple of stitches. I'm going to go forward a couple of stitches, and just to be sure I'll go back again. And now I'm going to continue on, and I'm going to do that at the other end as well. So now I am actually sewing through all the layers that I've got to sew through, and so I'm just taking it nice and slow, removing my wonder clips as I have to, and just, you can see here I'm just crushing those pockets down, and it's giving me a nice flat area to work with. And I'm just using my presser foot as a guide, and I'm coming up to another one, and I just remove that. Now when you come up to the pockets, you want them to lay as flat as possible, so you may have to move a wonder clip, and I like to have them, so I'm sewing towards it, so I'm going to have it sewing over the top of that and pushing it. Instead of trying to force it over the top like that, I'm going to let it flow naturally and just go with the flow of the bag. Now when you come up to these, take it slow, just listen to your machine. If it's struggling to get through, slow down a bit more, hand crank it a little bit if you have to, use your tailor's awl to get it all into place. So you can see here I'm using it as an extension of my hand, and I'm just holding that into place, and then I can continue stitching on, trying to crush that out of the way as much as possible. And having your needle in the down position is really key at this point, because what will happen is you will just stay on track. You won't get a wobbly seam or anything like that because you've got your needle in the down position, and it won't move when you stop or manipulate the fabric or anything like that. And basically we're just going to do exactly the same on the other side as well. So getting to lay everything as flat as possible. You can see, you probably can't see, but I'm just slowly but surely going through, making sure that everything is lining up nicely. All my raw edges are lining up. You may get a little bit of shifting of your binding and stuff like that, so just make sure that you double check that. You can see here I've got to the end and I'm actually coming up to that part that I need to sew a couple of times. Okay, I can take this wonder clip off now and I can just let that feed through, come off, back stitch, and then I can go off, and when I get to the end again I'm going to back stitch, and that's it. One side is on, and now we're going to repeat that exactly the same thing for the other side. Okay, so you can see here that it's all attached on, and the binding is on as well. It can wrap over now, and basically I'll hand stitch that into place, and you can see there that that gives me a nice clean finish on the outside of the bag. All right, so the next part is to sew the other side on. So all you're going to do is repeat exactly what I just done. Okay, at this point you want to make sure that everything is lining up. You may have to do a bit of an adjustment so your sides are all in the same place, and that you're getting a nice flat finish and you're not getting wobbly pockets or anything like that. So I can see here that I've got to make a little bit of adjustment on this end, and then my pockets will sit nice and even, and then we will be ready to hand stitch our binding on for this section and then attach our zipper. So I'm going to keep going. Okay, so our pockets are now on, our sides are all attached, and we can see now that we can now wrap our binding around. So basically all I do for this is, as I said, is I just hand stitch this in place with a blind stitch. So I'm going to move the sewing machine out of the way and I'm going to show you how to do that. But the first thing you want to do is grab your wonder clips again. Okay, you can double check to make sure that it's all closing up nicely, and you can see here that our bag is closing up nicely and our pockets are all sitting straight, which is great. Sometimes they're a little bit wonky when you first do it because you've just crushed them right down, but they will come right for you. All right, and I can see that the sides of my bags are lining up and even. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to attach the binding by hand. Now, if you're going to do this by machine, again, you would do exactly the same thing. You would roll it over and you would clip it into place and then stitch it down. I personally do not like doing it that way. I find it very cumbersome. It's never neat for me. I can say right here, right now, that I am not good at machine binding, so I avoid it at all costs. So I'm going to show you how I do it. It's entirely up to you. I prefer it because it gives it a neater finish. Again, you can crush down your pockets and all the rest of it. They're all secure in place. And you can see here that I'm just rolling that binding over, and then I'm just going to get some clips and clip it into place. Now, I want it to look even. So you may have to bring it down a little bit to get it to all look like it's, you know, hand sewn in the correct position. I generally put a clip where the pockets are because that is a little bit bulky there and it just holds it nicely in place. Now, don't worry too much if your binding goes past this here. We're going to snip that off. We're going to use our pinking shears and we're going to snip that off once it's in place. All right, so you can see there, I'm just rolling that over and that's encasing all those raw edges and it's giving us a nice finish. And for me, because I sell my bags and everything like that, a nice finish and a professional finish is what I'm going for. These particular bags, I sell them for $130 plus postage. If it's a specialized fabric or anything, that's just for our base fabrics that we've got. So these are my basic fabrics. If it was a more expensive fabric, such as a Tallulah pink or, you know, a custom fabric that costs a lot of money, then obviously the prices would be adjusted accordingly. All right. So, but as I said, this is from our $10 range of fabric that I'm using today. So that makes it $130. And when you consider how much work goes into them, because not everybody can sew, some people really want to have the bags and all the rest of it. So I offer that service for them. I have about a 5-week, 6-week turnaround on these ones because, as you see, there's a lot of work that goes into them. But hopefully now you can actually make one for yourself and you can make them for your friends as presents and all that sort of stuff. All right, so we've almost got that all clipped into place. This is the easy part. And then all you're going to do is you're going to get a thread, and I basically just pull it from my sewing machine, and you're going to double it over. And grab your sewing needle. I just use a sharps for this because we're going through quite a bit. Now, you don't want to go through to the other side of the bag. So basically, like when you're doing, if you've done a quilt before, this is the same as a quilt binding. You don't want to go all the way through. If you use a matching thread and you do happen to go all the way through and you didn't realize, you probably won't see it anyway. But the aim of the game here is just to catch that lining fabric and the side fabric. Okay, so all we're going to do is we're going to do a blind stitch. Just get myself a bit comfortable and hopefully you can see that. All right, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to come up out of the edge of that top edge of that fabric, okay, off the fabric for now. And then I'm going to catch that lining fabric and just come out on the edge. Okay, and I'll do that a couple of times and that's going to secure it in spot. Now, I'm not too fussed whether I can see this at this point because this is going to get trimmed off and then it's going to be encased in another binding for the main zipper. All right, so then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch along my binding. So how I do that so the thread disappears, okay, is where I've come out, I go up and get the lining fabric without going through and then come out about 1/4 of an inch along, and then that little thread will just actually disappear. So I go in where I came out and I just go along. And sometimes you can see it and sometimes you can't. But match your thread really well and then you won't have a problem. So you can see there that it's just disappearing. You can't actually see it, but it's anchored down. And you're going to continue that all the way along. Now, it might seem like it takes a long time, but it doesn't. If you just take little snippets at a time, you'll be fine. Give it a little bit of a tug and it disappears. Now, as I said, I'm not worried about the start here because the simple fact is that this is going to be hidden by another binding. What I'm concerned about is this edge here, making sure that it's nice and neat. If you need to, crush down your pockets and then you can continue on. Now when I get to this point here where my side is meeting my binding, I'm actually going to do a couple of stitches here. So you may end up seeing them, but it's better to give you that, even though it's stitched in, it's just going to give you that little bit of added security for when it's opening and closing. So I just go in at the same point each time, and you can see there that it disappears, but I know that that's going to stay there and not give me any problems. All right, so now I'm going to continue along, and now we're on top of the sides of the bag. Okay, and the thread just went uneven, so even that out. Okay, and I always double it over because it is the sides of the bag. Now I made my bag back in I made the first bag back in 2016, 17, something like that, and I use it all the time for retreats. I have many people fondling my bag because we've had it as a retreat, and making it at a retreat, and it hasn't come apart. So, and I put a lot of stuff in it. Okay, so basically you're just going to work along your binding, making sure that your threads are being invisible and you can't see them, and you can see there that you can't really see them except for where I've started, and that's okay because a binding's going there and that's where we've started. All right, so we're going to continue along with that. Okay, so our binding is now on. We can move on to the next step. So you can pull this up now and you can see that our bag is coming together quite nicely. It's got our binding on the edge. Now is the time to trim off all of your excess threads and everything like that. Okay, so the next step is to turn our bag over and we're going to attach our zipper tabs. So we're going to get our closed end and we're going to lay that into the center of our bag. Okay, making sure that we are centered. I've got a center seam here, so it makes it nice and easy for me. And then I'm just going to put some wonder clips just to hold that in place for a moment, and then I'm going to actually pin that. So you can see there it's nice and centered, and then I'm just going to grab a couple of pins and I'm just going to pin that into place. Now I'm going to take it nice and slow because I am going to have to sew over these pins, so you might need to hand crank it or something along those lines. And then you're going to repeat that with the other side as well. Now it is a little bit tricky to get it under the machine. The reason that we've got the pins in there is so it doesn't move as we're stitching. You can see that's just lining, it's just gone past the binding a little bit, and we are just going to stitch as close as we can to the edge of the binding, sort of in the center there, and that's going to give us our handle in place. Now I do like to stitch it down and then stitch over it again. Okay, and I back stitch at the beginning and the end 2 times, and that because this is going to be your handle, so it is going to have a little bit of stress on it. So I just like to have that double stitching there and back stitching a couple of times at the beginning at the end. All right, so now to get it underneath the machine, it is, as I said, it is a little bit tricky, and you just need to persevere with it. Get your tailor's awl as well, just in case you need it. Set your machine up ready to go. You want to elongate your stitches because you are going through bulk again, and basically all you're going to do is you're going to crush those pockets down again, just like when we sewed them in, and we're going to maneuver our bag underneath our presser foot. Oops. And you probably can't actually see what I'm doing because the bag is in the way. All right, so we want to lay that down as flat as we can, and we want to have our binding sitting nice and flat. Okay, and then what I like to do is I find the edge of the zipper tab and I put my presser foot down and I put my needle in the down position, so I know that that's going to hold it in place. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch a couple of stitches and I'm going to back stitch twice. Okay, I've got my tailor's awl in case I need it. Generally I don't for this step, but sometimes I do. Elongate your stitches so they go through all the bulk. Okay, and just start out nice and slow, do a couple of stitches, go back, come forward, go back, and then continue on nice and straight. Okay, and basically you're stitching on the binding and the zipper tab together, and then you get to the end and you're going to do a back stitch, and then you're going to come forward and you're going to go back again. Now the reason that I put the zipper tabs on now is because it's a lot easier not having to worry about the zip being in the way. It sits nice and it's a lot flatter. The bag opens up a lot easier without the zip on. You're not constricted by that. So now I'm going to take the needle out in the down position and I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm not even going to worry about cutting my threads at this point. And then I'm just going to put the needle in the down position again, and I'm going to stitch on that line or as close to that line that I just stitched. Again, I will do a back stitch, but I won't do it twice this time. I will just do a standard one and then I will stitch on. Now, as I said, you've got to get as close as you can onto that line, but if you don't, you just get beside it, that's okay too. It is the bottom of the bag. It's just giving us that extra security. All right, so now I'll just pull this out and I will get rid of all my little threads, because there's a fair few of them. Now you could possibly put rivets into the bottom of the bag. I've never done that before, but that is quite a substantial amount of bulk that you've got to go through, so it can make it a little bit cumbersome. All right, so I've taken out my pins. You can see there that I haven't cut a thread. So you can see there that that is now attached on, and it's not going to come off. Like, I can put a lot of pressure on that and I know that it's not going to come out. So once we've done our zip and our binding on our zip, we'll slip it in and then we will just top stitch that across the top. We'll do 2 rows of stitching and then our zip will be in place. I'm going to repeat that for the other side. Okay, and there we go. Our zipper tabs are on. I know that they're secure in place. You can see there. And now we are moving on to the next section, which is actually putting our binding onto our zip, and then our bag will be finished. Okay, so now it's time to put our exterior zipper on and our exterior binding. All right, so the first thing that you want to do is you want to find the center of your bag and make a little mark, and you want to find the center of your zipper, of one side of your zipper. Now I've got an open-ended zip, so I can separate mine. If you're using Zipper by the Yard, you can separate yours too, and then put your zipper tab on a zipper pull, on afterwards. I don't use by the Yard because I have these readily available in my shop, and it just makes it nice and easy. So I've separated the two. I've found the center of my bag. I've found the center of my zip. I'm going to place the edge of my zipper tape with the edge of the lining and the exterior fabric. Now, remembering that you've got fusible fleece on both exterior and lining, so they're not going to shift too easy, and they're going to grab each other. So you want to really make sure that you've got your raw edges lining up. And then I'm just going to clip that into place. And I'm going to do that all the way along, making sure that everything is lining up, and then I'm going to add my binding. So the same as what we did with the sides of the bag, where we put everything in place first and then we added the binding last, because it made it nice and quick and easy to clip everything in. I also tend to use a lot of Wonder Clips for this step because I don't want anything moving. I don't want to have to re-sew anything or unpick anything. You also want to have your zipper foot on your machine so you can stitch without worrying that your presser foot's going to hit the teeth of the machine or anything like that. Alright, so once you've got that into place, and making sure that your zipper teeth are facing up, that's very important, okay, and in. Because what happens is the bag comes up and this zipper is going to go across the top of the bag, and so we need the teeth to be in towards the center of the bag and the edge of the tape to the outside of the bag. So then we're just going to grab our binding. Now my binding strips are a little bit longer, about 1 inch either way of the zip, okay, and then I just grab my center point by just folding it in half, and then I'm just going to line that up with the center point here, and then the raw edges with the raw edges, and then I'll just slowly go along and pinching everything into place so nothing moves when I release that Wonder Clip, and I'm just going to clip that into place, and then I will go down the other way. And I'm not going to worry too much about the binding against the zip down this end or this end here, because I can line that up. You can put a couple of pins in if you want, if you're concerned that it's going to move or anything like that, that is fine. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to start at this end, so you can see that my binding fabric goes past the zip. I'm going to have the needle in the down position on my machine. I'm going to change my presser foot to a zipper foot, and I'm going to just stitch all the way along. I'm going to do a back stitch here at the beginning, and I'll do a back stitch at the end, and I'm just going to stitch all the way along, making sure that everything is secure as I'm going. So I won't release these Wonder Clips until I'm absolutely sure. Now if you don't have Wonder Clips, you can actually get your pins through this, and you can just leave them in place and stitch over them, going slow of course, because you don't want to break a needle. Making sure that you've got a heavy needle in again. Just continue on with that denim needle. After you finish making this bag, you probably want to disregard that, dispose of that needle, because the simple fact is that you have done a lot of work with it. Alright, so I'm going to head to the sewing machine and we're going to sew our binding down. Repeat that to the other side of the bag, and then we're almost finished. We're almost there. Okay, so we're at the sewing machine. I've already put my zipper foot on, and I am now ready to start sewing. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my raw edges of both my zipper tape and also the binding fabric, and then I'm just going to place that underneath my zipper foot, and I'm going to put the needle in the down position, and I'm going to run the edge of my presser foot against the edge of the zipper teeth. So basically what will happen is that'll come in about an eighth, almost a quarter of an inch from the zipper tab, and I'm just going to go all the way along. Now when I come up to the binding on the bag here, I'm actually going to do a couple of back stitches there. That's because it's another pressure point, so we don't want to have it come away or anything like that when we're opening and closing our bag. All right, so as I said, you can put some pins in if you need to. I'm pretty confident that I can sew this without having to worry too much, and I'm just going to have this edge of my presser foot going along the edge of the zipper. Now I can feel the zip in there, and I can see whether my zipper tape and everything is lining up with my zip tape. All right, so I'm just going to keep going and continue along. So we've stitched that all down. You can see there that the zip is in place, the binding is in place. So now all we need to do is stitch that down. So you're going to do that exactly how you did the last binding. Okay, so all we do is we just roll that over. So you can see there that I'm just taking it and rolling it to the outside, and you can see here that we've got our raw edges, so that is just going to encase that all into place. And you just grab your wonder clips and just go along and clip that all into place, and then we'll stitch that down. Now again, you can stitch this by machine. I personally don't like it done by machine. All right, now when you get up to, it's very easy along this edge here. When you get up here, your zipper will want to twist on you. So you just want to keep it straight, and you're just going to line that up on the zipper tab and just come over, and just past where you've sewn, you are going to place that binding. Again, you're just going to do that blind stitch all the way along, and then that way it will be in place, and then we can insert into our zipper tabs. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and when we come back I'll show you the next step. Okay, so we have now put our binding on. It's all stitched into place, and we have closed our zipper up, and you can see here that we've got some straggly bits at the ends, and we need to get rid of those. So now what we're going to do is we are actually, I'll just move the sewing machine out of the way a bit and show you what I'm talking about. We are basically going to insert our zip and our binded zip into the zipper tab, and we're going to come down a little bit of a ways. But first of all, what we want to do is we actually want to take off this metal bit so we don't run the risk of cutting, like stitching into that. So grab your scissors, and I'll just grab my, because these are quite heavy, and I've got a pair of scissors that I usually use for these heavy zips, and all you're going to do is you're just going to cut that off. Okay, and you can just disregard that. Now all we're going to do is we are going to slip this in, okay, and you're going to center it, and you want to just make sure that there is enough in there for you to stitch on. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a couple of wonder clips, and I'm just going to hold that in place. Then I'm going to go up to the other end, and that's where the zipper pull is. So I'm just going to move this zipper pull back just a little bit. Okay, and I'm just going to get rid of this metal stop here. So again, I'll just use my scissors and I will just cut directly across. Okay, so now what I want to do with this end, I'm actually going to put that under my sewing machine, and I'm going to just do a couple of tack stitches there, just so when I put it into the zipper tab, it doesn't move on me and come apart. All right, so that's really easy to do. All we're going to do for that is basically stick it underneath the sewing machine, and we're going to go backwards and forwards over that, and that's going to create a little stop for us. All right, so you don't even have to pick the bag up for this bit. This is the easiest bit on the bag. Alrighty, so we're just, as I said, we're just going to do a couple of back stitches to backwards and forwards just to make a makeshift stop, and go back, go forward, go back, and come forward and go back. And basically what that's going to do is just going to hold it in place. I might just actually do another one. There we go. I got it that time. All right. So I know that I can move that zipper pull and it's not going to come off or anything like that. All right, so the next step is to just make sure that you've got no threads or anything in the way. And we're going to start with the zipper pull end, for the simple fact is that we don't want to run the risk of taking that off. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this around so you can see what I'm doing. And again, I'm just going to insert that into... And I'm not going to go all the way down. I'm just going to go a little way down. And then I'm going to grab a couple of wonder clips and I'm going to stitch that, hold that into place. Okay. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to making sure that my zipper is laying nice and flat. So you can see there that it's come together and it's laying nice and flat. Then I'm just going to stitch directly across that, and I'm going to do 2 lines of stitching. So you'll be able to feel that the zipper pull, the zipper is inside the tab. So you want to do one across the top here, down about 1/8 of an inch, and then you want to do another one across there, and that's going to hold it in place. You're going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and then we will repeat that to the other side. So you can see it's quite easy to do, okay, and I'll just turn that so you can see what I've done. Okay, it's a little bit awkward at this point. So you see there that I've actually stitched that in, and that's caught that zipper. Okay, and that's my bottom row, and now I'm going to sew right along this edge using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I know that this is not going to come out now, so it makes it super easy to do that second lot of stitching. again, make sure that you get rid of all your threads from around your zip, because you're going to be opening and closing it, and you do not want to get a thread caught up in your zip at all. All right, so there we go. You can see there that that is on. We've got our zip in both ends. I've just got to trim some threads off, and then that's it. We're finished. Okay, so there we go. Our bag is all finished, and we've just got to snip some more little threads off. There are a few still hanging around, so I'll go right over that bag, and I suggest that you do too, because there is a lot of zips and you don't want anything getting caught into your zips. You can see here that our bag will now open nice and easy, and everything will be easily accessible to you, and I really hope that you enjoy making this bag. Alrighty, well that's it. We are at the end of our sew along for the large mountain retreat bag. I hope that you enjoyed the video. You can see here that we had gone through every step, and you've ended up with a beautiful bag at the end of it. It is quite a large bag, but it is an awesome bag to have to put all your stuff in, and then you can just head off to retreat and you not have to worry about that you've forgotten anything. As you can see from the bag, underneath the pockets, you can put patterns and rulers and all sorts of stuff in there. So make sure that you head over to our Facebook group and join if you haven't already. The link is down below, and share your bags with us and how you went. If you've got any questions, you can ask them there, or you can send me an email. All that information is down underneath this video. So if you like this video today, don't forget to give us a thumbs up down below, and also hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon beside it, and then that way you won't miss out on any future posts. And for those that don't know, my name's Nicole Reid for Darvanalee Design Studio, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye for now.